Hello and welcome back. It is another week. Welcome back to Let's Discuss with Meg Duke, a podcast where we discuss some things perinatal and all things mental health. This week, I wanted to talk about holiday stressors, and my daughter is homesick, so I may have to cut this short when she wakes up from her nap. So we're just gonna hang in there and see how it goes. This past week, I was lucky enough to be invited to a corporation to discuss holiday stress for their caregivers group. They have great little small groups for different things for mental health, diversity, equity, and inclusivity. They have a bunch of different things anyway. So, but the one that I've gotten to work with twice now is their caregivers group, and this time we talked about holiday stressors and holiday planning. And for them, especially in their industry, the months of October, November, December, we call it O&D, are very difficult. There are a lot of demands, a lot of time pressures, little flexibility, and that's really stressful. As the spouse of somebody who works in this industry, I can tell you, I can attest. My husband used to not be able to go to anywhere for Thanksgiving because he had to work the day before and the day after Thanksgiving, and so he would stay in Dallas, and he got the tickets to go to the Cowboys game, so that was at least cool. But and I would travel to see family, and sometimes I'd get to stay back with him, and just a lot of things. In fact, so we wanted to talk about kind of work expectations, family expectations. They would put out a survey to the group, and a lot of people wanted to discuss finances, which I know you've all heard my episode with Lindsay Bryan Podvin. If you have not, please go back and listen. Kids are expensive. I also made sure to give her a plug during my presentation as well. Everybody go follow her on Instagram, go listen to my episode. So if you haven't, but I'm going to touch on that again here in a little more. As well, talking about self-care, lots of stuff. So let's jump in because I am excited to get this out a little bit before Thanksgiving and then hopefully leading into the rest of December. And yeah, so I wanted to talk about first, how do we communicate boundaries with family, with work, for those of you who work? What are expectations? What do you have a really rough work schedule? What does that look like? How do we communicate? What do we have those expectations? How do we go from there? So kind of reflect in a moment while I'm talking. What has your experience been? Is this your first holiday season with your company? Have you been here before for a holiday season? What are the expectations from your management? What are the expectations from your family and loved ones? Are they accommodating? Are they not accommodating? Are you able to be open in discussing your feelings and your stressors? Are you not? Those are definitely things to think about and kind of figuring out what your expectations are yourself moving forward. So those are definitely important. How do we, the holiday magic of it all, right? How do we make the magic but not feel overburdened? How do we take care of ourselves? How do we do the things that are important without burning ourselves out, right? And for some of you, you might be transitioning into hosting responsibilities this year. What life changes, family changes, stressors, whatever's going on, the pressures that come along with that. I know my grandfather recently passed away, actually just last week, and I know my grandmother's luckily with us and still very active, and she'll be doing that. But I do imagine that my family might be having to increase a little bit of that and stepping up and helping her. So just some considerations for those of you. Also, we're going to get to grief around the holidays. Don't worry. That's another topic for sure. But here's where I talked about the gym quick. If you are on my Instagram, you may have seen this reel. On the days you have 40% and you give 40%, you gave 100%. I want to get that tattooed across my forehead. Not really, because I'm not Post Malone, but I am so guilty of this. I own every part of it. Me, 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 me. Hello, it's me. I constantly want to be giving 100%. I constantly want to be making everything magical. Everything's a moment. Everything's a learning opportunity. Everything, what else could I be doing? And it's just not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not realistic. My kids don't necessarily ask for me to do all of that for them. Neither does anybody else. And yet I expect it of myself. And I was actually on with my girlfriend, Laura. It's her company she asked me to come in, and we were going through the deck the night before the presentation. And I just remember we were chatting and we were laughing, and I had a glass of wine too as well. And I just remember being like, Laura, my my brain capacity is between a 60 and a 70 right now, but I'm giving you a 60 to 70, so you're getting 100%. So I made that joke, but like, you just have those moments where you feel like your brain is really not functioning fully, or your body, or whatever it might be, emotionally, you might be not be. And so I just think that it is just so impactful the way that Jim Quick said that. That's QWIK if you all want to follow him. I'm going to say it again, just to reiterate and kind of cap that off. On the days you only have 40% and you give 40%, you gave 100%. Literally, you gave all you had. And yeah, it would be nice to maybe if you had more, but you didn't. So we're not going to shit on ourselves. We're going to move forward. Some of the ideas we talked about for taking some things off your plate. If you are employed, looking in your EAP resources, depending on your employee assistance program, for those of you who are not familiar, although I did do an episode also on EAP. Look at me plugging my own podcast within a podcast. So tacky. There are different things that can be found in there. I know their company is very specific to itself, so yours might not have any of this or some of it or a mixture. Talking about budgeting, discounts. Does your office, does your agency have any sort of connections with discounts from major retailers? Travel plans, any assistance with travel, catering, right? And as well, if you have EAP, I'm always a proponent of therapy. I think it depends on it depends on your company, but usually it's around 6 EAP sessions per situation. And then some companies offer virtual therapy, which is, I think, significantly more. So definitely, hit up your human resources department, ask them for access to your employee assistance program. Another thing, I'm going to get to this in a little bit, but I'm going to talk about high level here, and then we're going to really dig in a little more. But holiday meals, what are some things that you might be able to let go of? Can you let somebody else make grandma's mashed potatoes this year? Can you, heaven forbid, buy a store-bought pie instead? And we'll talk about it more in a little bit, but check out Pinterest for simple ideas. Check your local grocery store, see if they do any sort of catering, restaurant catering, different apps. I think Supercook was one that we had mentioned, but checking around there, seeing what are the things that you can do to take that away from yourself, take the stressors off. I feel like I'm really breezing through this, but I think I have like 20 minutes left of nap. So I really want to get through all of this because I want to share it with you all. And if I don't, maybe I'll do a live or a reel or something on it, or maybe I'll bother Laura and make her come and sit and we'll talk about it and share a part 2 heading into December. So the next thing I wanted to talk about was finances and spending boundaries. Financial component is stressful for me 365 days a year. I own my own business and I'm stressed about it constantly, and I am constantly working on my self-talk for that. It only heightens as we get to the holidays. My family does celebrate Christmas, and Christmas presents are a normal thing. Pardon me for my lemonade moment. So I think the best thing for you to do is ask yourself, what is driving your purchases? What is it is it your obligation? Is somebody else forcing that? Do you have a friend group where everyone is forced to bring something every time? Is there a way that we can communicate? Hey, what if we all stopped doing that? Something like that, right? If it's an internal drive, asking yourself to be flexible, give yourself grace, but being intentional. I'm going to spend this amount of money on this thing because this is what's important to me. I have recognized myself, and I've talked about with other people. How did I get here? I had planned to do something, and then I'm this much more money over, or this many items over, or whatever it might be. I'm going to be really intentional this year. I'm going to make a list. I'm going to make sure it makes sense. I'm going to talk to Austin, my husband. We're going to make sure that we're on the same page. And I'm going to be really intentional. I'm going to work very hard myself. This is me talking to me now about impulse purchases, decreasing those for sure. And then if you have a flexible spending account, again, that's something else that we talked about in that. If that's something your employee offers, utilizing that in certain ways can be very helpful. You've got the funds, health savings account as well. Some of that does not roll over. So checking and seeing, you would be surprised. I think there's a website, I should have Googled that before I started, but I just thought about it. There's a website of like odd health savings account accepted expenditures or something. I don't know. Google that and see, because I think there are certain things that you'd be like, oh, I didn't know I could buy that. I didn't know I could buy that. And it perfectly qualifies. So that's important. Man, I am really breezing through it. I'm very aware. Some of you are like, I'm gonna have to put this on like a half speed. So the next thing that we talked about was gatherings. And I used the Brene Brown quote, disappointment is unmet expectations. I think sometimes we have a vision of what we'd like a holiday, friends, family gathering to be like. And I think disappointment comes a lot when we recognize the reality of the situation. Laura actually found a little graphic that says, let's have a family gathering for the remaining family members who still speak to each other. Life has been tense recently for a lot of us globally, and there are a lot of hot button topics that are discussed when people get together, and it can be very difficult. So I want to encourage everybody, what's your exit strategy, my friend? Have an escape plan. Drive yourself to that activity or that event. Being able to know that you can get up and leave if you need to is very important. When you're maintaining your boundaries and however that looks for you. So what are those things that you can do? Making sure, again, that you are honoring your personal boundaries. Give yourself mini breaks. If somebody needs to run to the store, volunteer. I'll go. No, I got it. I'll go by myself. Or, you and some loved one that you can kind of get out, go outside if it's not 75 below zero. I don't know, some of you who live in certain areas, maybe outside's not an option, but hopefully it is. And get some fresh air, some vitamin D, serotonin. Again, I'm going to use the word intentional a lot, as I do every single day. Be intentional about finding some mini breaks for yourself, getting away, getting some physical space, taking some breaths. And then the next thing that I talked about was being the champion of the non sequitur. So changing the topic of conversation can be very important. I was speaking to somebody recently, and they said that they had learned the saying, what an odd thing to say out loud, and then just move on, right? If somebody is saying something to you that is offensive or questionable, and then also, maybe I'm not your target audience for this conversation, and then moving forward and expressing, again, being very polite about it, but I will not be discussing this with you and moving forward. So just some ideas, some things to keep in mind. Excusing yourself from a conversation. You do not have to be polite and listen to somebody say something that hurts your feelings, makes you upset, at the expense, just to be polite at the expense of yourself. Grief at holiday time. I told you all my grandpa passed away last week, and while we're all very happy for him to not be riddled with Parkinson's in his body, obviously we're very sad because we miss him. And that's wild because it's 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and my family, it's my dad's family, and we always get together, every single person. The table, we have table on, we've now had to add tables to the tables to be able to get everybody to fit on it. So it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be sad for me because I'm going to be with my husband's family this year, and I don't get to be there for that first. I mean, again, I just saw them all last week. But it's not the same. So it'll be really interesting to see how everyone gets through the grief at holiday time. That's a very specific example to my family, but I know a lot of you are experiencing something similar. And not only something recent, fresh losses, but also triggers that come up that we're not necessarily aware even was a trigger for us, or anniversaries. I imagine every year around this time is going to be tough for my family for quite some time. And it's, of course, also in the United States, we celebrate Thanksgiving, which I want to go off on a tangent about renaming it to like Gratitude Day or something. It's like we got rid of Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Like, what are we doing for Thanksgiving? But we're not there yet. So I don't know, but I won't go off on that tangent. So whatever we celebrate next week. So it's about opening lines of communication. I think it's important for us to feel safe where we can be. It can also be our time to be vulnerable. Why I love group therapy so much is that sometimes you'll say something and it kind of gives permission for somebody else to think on that and express themselves in the same way. And I think, I can't, I need to stop saying I know. Sometimes it takes one bold person to be vulnerable in a family to express something, and another person to say, hey, wow, I never thought about that. I feel that way too. Or I think about it all the time, but I didn't want to say anything because I didn't know how people would respond. And so perhaps if you do feel safe, maybe you get to be the person who, in your newfound mental health and wellness journey, you can say, I'm going to be the one to stand up and say something first, or metaphorically stand up at least. So living with loss, living with loneliness, whatever it is that you're dealing with, don't should on yourself. I should feel differently. It's been so long. I shouldn't feel this way anymore. Accept where you are, right? Give yourself grace. Judging yourself for whatever it is that you're feeling doesn't make it feel any better. And then you're mad at yourself for judging yourself. So don't should on yourself, y'all. Another thing, family health. This is literally my case right in this dang moment. My daughter's home with an ear infection because she had a fever at school yesterday. And though she woke up perfectly fever free and happy as a clam, I couldn't take her to school. And so I'm trying to make it through my Friday. It's been a nightmare well, October, I got back from Cabo and I got sick, and then my daughter got RSV, and then I got the flu, and then I had to take her to the hospital because she had 102 fever. And now she's home again because I'm the default caregiver. And so, generally speaking, when something happens, when that phone rings, they don't call anybody else. They call me first. And I'm the one who drops everything. And yesterday I got called at 3:57 and made it to the doctor's office. Their walk-in clinic ends at 4:30. And I got there at 4:31, and bless them, they took my daughter because my son's here and I'm the only one here. And the only other option would be an emergency department or urgent care. And I know historically, I didn't even look because I didn't want to put it in the universe, but historically, urgent care has like hours ahead of time. You have to wait. And so it would have been after nap time, and I've had to bedtime, take both my kids to urgent care when they're trying to be asleep, or take both kids to the emergency department. So I'm so grateful that the timing worked out that I was able to get my daughter in. Um, so a couple things to keep in mind. Obviously, flu, RSV, COVID, things are a nightmare right now. Stock your medicine cabinet where you can. There is currently a children's Motrin shortage. There's a Cillin shortage, amoxicillin, penicillin. Obviously you can't stock your medicine cabinet with things that are prescription, but making sure, again, here we are again, I'm coming back to the corporate side of things. If you have an FSA and HSA, don't forget to use that. Making sure that you're expressing to your boss kind of proactively. I don't want to put things in the universe, right? We're not going to call it out, but just theoretically, if something were to happen, what would happen? Are you the default caregiver? Can you work from home? What do you do in daycare calls? Some of you have, I know for a fact, some of you have jobs where work from home's not an option. So what can you do in daycare calls, and what can we figure out in ways that we can all feel that we're supporting and we're feeling fulfilled in our professional lives, but also making sure that we're taking care of the people who rely on us. That brings me to which balls are glass. And I've talked about this in a podcast episode. I've talked about it on a reel. Can talk about it a little more here. Which balls are glass, which balls are plastic. There's a quote, and I wish that I would have remembered the whole quote, but basically, like, work is a plastic ball. If you're juggling all the balls, family, health, right? Work is one that I can't say that for everybody fully. Certainly, you determine what balls are what important to you, but that work is gonna, for me, right? Like, what am I gonna do? Not watch my 1.5-year-old? No, I'm gonna have to figure it out. So, for me, this is coming back to what I was talking about earlier too: store-bought pies versus homemade pies. Now, I will say, some of y'all have great grandma Gertrude's green bean recipe, and heaven forbid it is not the holiday without it. Well, then that's a glass ball. Fine. What else can change then? The chocolate chip cookies can be store-bought, right? Maybe, or something else. What is negotiable? What's non-negotiable? Again, making sure you're expressing that to your family and loved ones, communicating with your boss, school play, or whatever it might be, or this massive presentation I have to give. Who can I make sure is a backup because I have to be here for this work thing, whatever it might be. All of this is helpful. And again, when I was giving this presentation, it was to a corporation, but I think it's helpful for all of us who do work, and whether it's working in the home, working outside the home, avoiding quiet quitting, being intentional and present. So the example that I used was, there's an expectation that you're at work and you really want to go to your kid's school play. And so you lie and say that you're at an account or at a lunch meeting with somebody, but really you're at your kid's school play. But then you're stressed because you're not supposed to be there. And what if someone takes a picture of you in the audience and then they post it on Instagram, and then your boss finds it? It's a whole thing. So being as proactive as you can be and expressing that things are important. I'm not obtuse to the idea that some people don't have very kind and empathetic bosses, but I again, all we can do is try to work through some of these things. So the big four musts, we talked about this with Dr. Mikkel, and I added it in here. The big four musts: eating, make time to feed yourself, hydrating, making sure water. I know sometimes for some people it's difficult to get the water in. Hydration's are important. Sleep, again, I know we all feel this way, but making sure you're taking care of yourself and sleeping, doing the best you can, talking about sleep hygiene, and then movement. For me, it's hopping on the Peloton, For you, it might be going on a walk or whatever else it might look like for you. I use the word movement because I think it's a big catch-all. I don't want to say exercise. For you, you might not consider whatever it is that you do exercise, but moving, getting up and moving around also can be very important. And those mini breaks that I talked about earlier are very helpful. So I hear my little one up. The next things we were going to talk about was seasonal affective disorder. If you Google the 13 tips for dealing with seasonal affective disorder, I was going to walk through those here, but I'm going to have to jump. Sleep hygiene, we talk about revenge bedtime procrastination, setting a routine, blue lights and busy minds, making sure that you're being intentional about calming. Bed is for sleep and sex. If you're awake, get out of it, give yourself like 10 minutes to try to fall asleep. If you're not, get up, move around. You're not sleeping anyway. So it's like, I know people are like, but then I'm not sleeping. I'm like, you're not sleeping anyway. And you're not training your body and your brain to know like bed means sleep. So other coping skills, we talked about maladaptive versus adaptive coping skills, a daily mood tracker, all of that stuff. So I hate to jump. I'm going to try to maybe come back and do another section of this, but I feel like it's a good start. Since this will be coming out the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, in the United States anyway. But I did want to just thank everybody so much for tuning in. I wish you all the best in whatever holidays you do celebrate. If you celebrate no holidays, just the end of the year, the winter seasons, all of that can be very difficult for a lot of us. I wanted to give a huge shout out. I'm gonna list. So I wanted to let everybody know I have listeners in Germany, in Bavaria, Thuringia, and Saxony. I have listeners in Canada. Of course, we know that because I have many guests from Canada, Australia, Belgium, the United Kingdom. Hello, Maria in Northern Ireland. South Africa, Norway, Peru, and Austria. And that is just, it means the world to me. I appreciate every single one of you. It means the world. I was shocked when I saw some of those. So thank you so much. Feel free if I mentioned your country, shoot me a DM. I won't shout you out unless you ask me to, certainly, but I'd love to hear from you at Therapy by Meg on Instagram. I would love to hear from you all more. And I'm going to ask if everyone could please go like and subscribe to my podcast, to my YouTube channel. Give me 5 stars if you get a chance. Maybe even write a review. I know it's asking a lot, maybe, but it really does help with helping people in Saxony be able to find me. So everybody have a great one. Those of you who have any holidays coming up, I hope you get a chance to spend it with loved ones in some way. Be curious, not judgmental. Bye.